Hey, everybody. Happy Thursday. Welcome to our March meeting for the Homeless Solutions Advisory Council. This is a virtual meeting today, so no in person. It is great to see everybody on screen. We, of course, have a packed agenda. That's your hint for the next slide. um, my next slide is the agenda. See? Thank you. You got it. And so we're going to do some updates from our staff and our committees, do some more financial planning that we've been doing the last few months. And then Carly is going to be with us to do some performance management and evaluation tools review and looking for feedback. This meeting is a public meeting, and so there is opportunity for public comment. Thank you.
So we
And
had,
go ahead.
Kim, we had someone that seemed to raise their hand, but then they disappeared. So if they come back, maybe we can come back to that. But um, currently they're not there anymore.
So we provide opportunity for public comment. If you are here and would like to do that, please raise your hand in the Zoom functions, or you can always use the public comment form that is provided on the Solutions Council website. If that person comes back, Nadia, we will make time for them. Going to jump into some updates.
Thank you. I will provide some brief kind of logistical updates before turning it over to our Assistant Director, Jess Larson, for those bigger picture items. So a few logistical things. We are currently recruiting for new Solutions Council members. We have 2 vacancies. Some interviews have already happened, and our recruitment period will officially close March 27th. We will review any applications received and make recommendations at that April meeting. Thank you so much to our co-chairs, Kim and Drew, for joining us in our first interview, and many to come. And Nadia has put the application link in the chat. Please share that broadly with your networks. It's a great opportunity. And one benefit of our bylaws changing is that we are less prescriptive in filling specific seats and more so looking for the holistic picture of what makes sense in terms of the Homeless Solutions Council. And so these opportunities are open and available. And then a related update I just want to share, we are finally getting the bylaws to the Board of County Commissioners April 7th. It's a consent agenda item, and that also frees us up to officially complete recruitment, do co-chair elections, all of that good stuff. Thank you all for your patience, and we'll be able to put that behind us for a period of time following April 7th, and we'll be in touch when they're officially approved.
Can we go to the next slide? Just so muchas gracias.
I got a little ahead of myself. Okay, I've covered the staff liaison component. Jess, I turn it to you.
Thank you, Emily. I'll do a little audio check. I'm here in my office, sounding good. Okay, great. Nice to see everyone. Thanks for being here. Happy early spring break. We send good wishes to those who can't be here with us, so appreciate the virtual accommodations today. I'm going to go through the second 2 bullets on the page, but then I'm going to end on sort of our most our biggest update, if you will, which is the HUD meeting that Katie and I attended earlier this week. So just that's why it's not on this page, because it was just so recent. So just by way of a reminder and keeping you all in the loop on staff work that continues here in our department for our homeless services system. First, we have, as you will recall, over the last 4 years, our annual work plan that is due to Metro for our supportive housing services funding. We send them a draft in mid-April, and then a final document after our budget is approved by our Board of County Commissioners. So that work is underway right now, and we will be bringing you a draft of that work, I believe, next month. Similarly, we are working almost on the same timeline with a new work plan, if you will, and this is the required regional shelter plan now that we've been designated as the regional coordinator for the shelter system for the state in Washington County. So those two work plans are underway. And when we have a draft, we will be bringing that, which I believe will be next month, we'll be bringing that to you all for your awareness so we can demonstrate to those funders our intended continued operations of this system of care. And then similarly, in the realm of big staff work underway, is the neighbor engagements that we're doing right now, especially under Emily and her team, but really it's an all hands on deck effort. Jill, my colleague in the real estate development team, is also supporting both of these projects because they are both owned by our housing authority, the Cornell Road Transitional Recovery Program, and also the Central County Saferist Village. We are having a meeting with the neighbors every other month until those projects open. And we just want to keep you all in the loop because your participation in those neighbor conversations is very meaningful to help bring forward the kind of the values-based conversation of why these programs are critical to our system in Washington County. But if you're not able to make it, that's just fine. Please send your community relations team some kudos and gratitude for continuing to have tough conversations and help bring these programs online.
Wonderful.
And
Go ahead.
then
Sorry, Jess.
I'm seeing a chat come through. Okay, so sorry about that. The last item is not on this list, but is quite important. So wanted to bring it to you all right away. We had Dr. Marbut, who is a senior policy advisor to HUD Secretary Turner, in town this last week. And he worked with our HUD field office to host a strategic meeting with community leaders on homelessness work here in the metro region. Actually, there were leaders from across the state in the audience. It was an invite-only meeting that included elected officials, department leadership, and some community-based organizations were also invited. And I think I wanted to share with you sort of the summary of Katie and my take. Molly was otherwise committed and could not attend. So Katie and I attended for the Department of Housing Services along with Commissioner Snyder and Chair Harrington, who sat, those two sat at the table. Dr. Marbut kind of led the event with his talking points, and then there was time for probably about 30 minutes of question and answer. So Katie and I didn't participate in that, but we took in all of the information. It definitely is a bit, it feels like a bit of a roadshow where the new administration is going to talk to, welcome in Adam. I'm sorry, we had some technical difficulties. Happy to have you here. We've just been doing a round of updates, and I am talking about the HUD meeting that happened earlier this week, if you've heard about it. And in fact, you may have had some, Maggie was at the table from HealthShare, Maggie Bennington. So it seems that they're doing a bit of a roadshow, the administration, to describe their intent as in leading the homeless services work under the Continuum of Care program through some really significant changes, and giving us a heads up of what's to come in the next NOFO. Now, you've been hearing from Katie month by month of the legal challenges and the continued kind of chaos of whether or not we were going to NOFA. And we still have not NOFA'd, which is great. But we will need to complete the funding opportunity for the NOFA this summer, which was one of the takeaways. We're anticipating it to drop in June, probably. So we will be applying for the next year or two. I don't think we know how long it will continue, as was previously scheduled. The big changes are exactly the changes we've been anticipating and discussed with you all based on the earlier drafts of the NOFA that they attempted. It's clear, and Dr. Marbut's presentation was really laid out with a timeline and data points starting in 2007 to 2013, where their data shows that homelessness was really steady. And then 2014 on to current date, where their data shows that not only has investments in PSH increased significantly, but from their view, it's not ended homelessness. They said many times that they want to go back to the 2013 system, where they believe the balance of 1/3 shelter, 1/3 transitional housing, and 1/3 permanent supportive housing was a more effective approach. I think we can be prepared to make an application for the $5 million grant that achieves that 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 approach. And we can still continue to fund our system according to the recommendations of this council and best practices, because we have other additional funding. But the things that were concerning that I want to really just name directly for you all is that this administration clearly believes housing first and harm reduction are failed housing policies. And they will be presenting this national NOFO as a competition. They were clear that they didn't believe jurisdictions are entitled to the resources they've received previously, that the intent is for a national competition according to those kind of newly named priorities, especially focusing on participation requirements, recovery expectations. Yeah, so concerning, but at the same time, exactly what we've been anticipating, and in some ways, no real news. But because it was in the news and it was so prominently attended, I wanted to make sure you all had a direct kind of summary from myself and Katie, and take some time to hear any questions. Before we conclude this specific topic, though, I just want to name that the department, especially under Molly and Jill's leadership, is also navigating other very challenging decisions at HUD. They have put out a proposed rule, HUD has, around no longer allowing mixed status households to be eligible for housing services, which would impact I believe 30 to 40 households in Washington County. And then, as you've previously heard, a plan to sunset the emergency housing voucher program several years earlier than necessary, which will impact another probably 75 households. So this COC body of work is one of many things that the department is navigating under the changed and changing direction of this administration. I just want to name that for your awareness. Okay, so is it all right, Chair? If it pleases the chair, I'd be happy to pause for questions, because this was a lot of new information that was not previously scheduled.
So thankful you guys were invited to the space. So of course we can open it up for any questions that folks have. Okay, as always, staff are always available to us. And so if you have a question later or want some more information, please reach out to Jess or Katie specifically about this, but the entire team for anything else. So thank you, Jess, for that overview. Thank you, Jess and Katie, for being there. Always interesting. Okay, next is you did great, Emily. Next is our committee updates. And so, yeah, do we have any updates from HAC?
We had a meeting this morning, and some of the things that Jess went over are the things that came up at HAC today. And the recording should be up soon. I would imagine, by early next week.
Perfect. Okay, what about McKinney-Vento?
Yeah, I can provide some updates. We also met this morning as a liaison group. Currently for Washington County, we're at 2,200 individual students qualified for McKinney-Vento services. About 64% of those kids are in Beaverton School District. They do cover a lot of area within the county, and so that number tracks historically. Out of those 2,200, approximately 230 are unaccompanied youth. So that's those kids that are experiencing those housing instability situations, with the addition of, unfortunately, not having a legal parent or a guardian with them. We've been seeing a lot of trends county-wide within the school districts of families reaching out because they're exiting the shelter system, and then there aren't any supports for them. And so they'll immediately go back to either their vehicle or being doubled up and then continue the shelter cycle. We've also been seeing more families that are having trouble with their vouchers. So they're fortunate enough to receive a voucher, but then either the places that they go to fail inspections, and so they have to go back to square one, or there's a lot of delay from landlords. Yeah, so lots of stuff happening with those, unfortunately. We do have a quarterly meeting in April that's with all our community partners. So if any of you are interested in that, that's going to be April 16th from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. That's going to be at Home Plate Youth Services.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. And then probably going to look to staff for the RPOC update.
Thanks, Kim. I'm happy to share what I know, which is that I believe they've tentatively scheduled the first meeting of the new regional advisory body that is both a planning and policy making body and the oversight body. So bringing together the two SHS bodies. And that first meeting, unfortunately for all of us, is the night of Community Actions Gala. Which is, I think, April 15th. So the first meeting will be April 15th from 3 until 6 p.m. at Metro. And there will be some invitations to the new members for orientation before then. But we are still waiting for them to release their membership list. So I think that's kind of the extent of the update that I have at this time.
Look this morning, Jess, and it looks like the membership list is going before council, the first meeting in April. So it should get approved there, and then they'll move forward with their meetings.
Thank you, Kim.
We'll
Really
learn more.
appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, we are going to jump into the meat of our agenda and go back to our financial planning conversation. So, going to send it right back to you, Jess.
All right. My job here is to be mostly brief and provide an overview to get us right back into the discussion. There's a tiny bit of new content this time because this is in some ways the third time we are having this kind of evolving conversation of how we are planning specifically for our fiscal year 26-27 budget, but more broadly, how we continue to refine our decision making and investments to support a sustainable and balanced system of care. So this is part 3, and our last time we're going to be having this specific conversation around this year's budget, though as you will see in our next agenda item when Carly joins us, really what we do here is financially plan for our system of care all year round, and that really includes our evaluation work and so many other elements of our work. So inviting this body into that year-round cycle of financial planning. All right, so by way of a reminder, and as you will recall, this year's budget was really focused on a couple specific themes. First, the intention to sustain the currently operating system of care, to sustain shelter beds, to sustain slots in our permanent supportive housing and rapid rehousing programs, et cetera, to sustain all that we have built, and to sustain that in the context of some revenue uncertainty. We are in a moment of benefiting from some increased resources, but those increases will be one-time in nature. So it would not be sustainable for us to build our system to that increase when we know those resources will not be there next year or the following year. And this is specifically due to some one-time resources from the state And what is looking to be like a blip on the screen with SHS, where there was some increased revenue in October, that will have us overshoot their forecast. However, they are anticipating that the next year, and especially the year after that, will be weaker years of revenue. So with that revenue uncertainty, we went into this budget year planning for a conservative approach so that we could confidently sustain the system of care through those future years of uncertainty. And as such, we've made some small adjustments in year 6, and that's the last bullet or the last set of bullets here. Those adjustments are increasing our service provider contracts with a set 2.7% COLA. It's our intention to provide COLAs to our providers when the revenue, when the resources can support that. And this is a year we felt we could and should do that. So the budget reflects that increase. As well as increasing some participant assistance in some of the contracts because of some changes that are being made structurally across the system of care. You've heard lots about the Housing Resolution Fund and how we will be making move-in payments for households going forward through that shared centralized fund. But that means that there needed to be some consideration for the partners' contracts such that there was a increase in participant assistance to help with things like screening fees or IDs and such. And then last, we noticed that there are some places in our system that we had a gap of a housing liaison position. I think most specifically in regards to supporting households graduating from permanent supportive housing into just a rent assistance only program, but needing to have a light touch case manager to support them. So really, these are meant to describe small tweaks made to sustain the overall system in our fiscal year 26-27 budget. Then moving on just briefly here, because when Heather visited us last time at our meeting last month, we spent more time going into this data. We just want to show you preliminary data that represents how we think about our throughput in the system. And there are 3 slides, the first being around shelters, the next slide being around housing programs, and the last slide being around diversion programs or programs where people don't have to wait for the rent assistance. And these 3 programs look at how many people are waiting for that service, how many people we've been able to help in the last fiscal year, and how many people have exited from that service to success to help us understand the throughput in our system. I'm really excited to tell you all that this data is presented to you in the best we can do today fashion, but what's exciting is in May, Heather and team will be coming back with much more elevated visual representation of our system through flow. So stay tuned, but for now, here's just some data points for your reference that help continue to inform how we think about funding and investing in a system of care that is balanced. All right, a couple more slides, just again, as reference. Oh, I'm sorry, I kind of walked through all of these very quickly. I'm not going to go through all the data points since you all got them last time. Let's pause here for a second. This is another kind of feature of this year's budget planning. And I spoke to it, but this is the slide that references that feature with specificity. So you can see that while our current fiscal year currently in operations and our next fiscal year as currently planned, we are anticipating revenue in excess of expenditures. But the reason we're not recommending to increase our system capacity is because in the fiscal year following that, we actually have a system that will exceed expenditures from our revenue. So we'll have a deficit that year. And in order to maintain that stability, that's why we are holding back we're kind of maintaining the system as it is. And then these, any revenue received above the expenditures actually contracted or budgeted will become one-time funding for this body's guidance and advice. And hold that thought in your head because that's where we're going to end up in this presentation today. All right, next, and again, as a reminder, These slides have been updated since you saw them last, but just to refine the data points, not significant changes worth reviewing. So the dollars are not exactly the same, but the theme is still the same. And you can see how we've divided the programs into the same buckets of programming that we report to our main funders. So we have the shelter access programs, the front door of our system, or safety off the streets. Then we have preventative programs, housing programs, mainly rapid rehousing and HCMS, but also ARLA only. And the supportive services is a smaller program. Don't think of it, this one is a little confusing to me because we have a lot of supportive services, wraparound services, but those are tied to the housing programs generally, or tied to the shelter programs. So these are the two supportive service programs that aren't tied to other programs, if you will. And then of course the system infrastructure to make all of the through flow happen. And then you can see on the next slide that information represented a little more visually. We'll go to the pie chart. There we go, thank you. Same data, just in a pie chart. And you know, when I saw this, I was like, wow, we really are a housing system. We really do believe that housing is the solution to homelessness, as demonstrated with these investments. This is the combination of all three primary funding sources we have. So SHS, which as you know is the greatest, but also COC and OHCS dollars from the state and the federal government. So the vast majority of resources are going into rapid rehousing, PSH, ARLA only, rent assistance, HCMS case managers, and then smaller portions into prevention, system infrastructure. And it looks like almost a quarter of our system is in those safety off the streets programs. And that is the question we invite you to continue engaging us with, is like, is this the right balance? And it's not easy to answer just based on this pie chart because there's so many more details and nuances there within. But, you know, we hope that this pie chart sort of helps you think about that question and continuously engage in that question with us. So I think my job now, those were both, all of that was referential material because you've seen it all before, and that was just background context. And I'm moving us into our discussion today for this third iteration of financial planning. And I think these are just themes that I've already sort of mentioned in this presentation, that it's year over year work, right? Our budget planning is really about managing this balanced system, which is an iterative question. And we see that through both the system evaluation work and also the program refinement work, where we can find cost efficiency. So it's both a balancing of our investments and saving dollars where it makes sense to be more efficient with our public resources. We put here an example might be looking at how we manage our shelter waitlist program so that we can increase shelter bed utilization. That's an example of program evaluation that will enhance our financial investments. So I believe this slide is where we pause. We have two more slides. No, I just have one more slide. So we're going to break this conversation today into two main questions. The first is going to be this question about how we think about our system refinement, and what research would you ask of staff as we go into this year-round practice of iterative evaluation and system refinement. What research would you like to have us do, our staff do, to bring back to your council for further discussion? Or what priorities, what issues do you most want us to focus on? We can't do it all at once, but where does it make sense to start or go next in thinking about refining our system? So it's a big open-ended question, kind of inviting us into the year-round planning, financial planning conversation. Chair, I'll turn it back to you maybe to facilitate the Q&A, but then just a note that there's one more slide for a second question.
Great. Okay, you guys.
Stacy?
Oh, great. I couldn't get there. Open up the floor for questions. Raise your hand in the Zoom world so that we know you have a question, or you can actually just raise your hand physically if you really wanted to. But Stacy, we do see your hand up.
Thank you. This is really exciting to get to this place where it's year over year. There's going to be kind of decisions that are made in a way that's, I don't know, that we repeat. So, you know, welcome to maturity or some kind of words like that. I think it was really interesting to see the next piece of the presentation. So some of the performance information that pushes you to do certain evaluations. And so the one thing that I might flag right here is if there are already some kind of wish list or one-off list that has been kind of building up, let's make sure we're hearing about it as we go. So it's not like, you know, artificially, okay, these are the things that are the one-off things. I think you can be discovering those as the system is running all year, you know, in the past years, all the instability and movement and things that have been changed in the past are probably throwing off some ideas or what are one-off investments that could be helpful. So I just want to kind of flag that it almost goes along with this moment to have a way to capture that one-off stuff so that when we have our discussion, people can understand what we're doing and then can say, okay, I got to wait for 12 more months, but there might be another chance for this conversation again. So that's what I wanted to flag. I don't have any specific things. I do have a little heartburn because I know what the support service programs are maybe better than some other people because I have some background in those and they're not well named. That's not the right way to talk about them, but it is a little bit like different, you know, systems that are aligned with housing and, you know, workforce development pieces just really can allow you to move into your own housing. And so that's the piece where it's like not many people are going to be able to likely be successful in that, but you never know within the household how many people are eligible, will engage in services. And so I don't know what words would be better to describe there, but between the like making your house livable, furniture services, and giving opportunity to households that are involved in the system, those two things, they kind of show, I think, a maturity of system that we want to make sure we're not really, yeah, wraparound supports. They're not being delivered in the same way as wraparound supports that are administered by your housing case manager. Typically, it really is a separate, it's like a scaffolding. That's what I'll call it, like scaffold programs. So you might want to call it that, like housing scaffold programs. I don't know. It sounds a little wonky, but anyway, those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Stacy. And perhaps while others think of questions or comments, Katie, do you want to offer up some of the, I heard you sort of ask in the early part of your question, Stacy, or your comments, you know, it'd be helpful to hear what staff are already working on, like what's on the list of want to get to in researching or evaluating our programs. And I know Katie has a list, she and her team have a big list. So I thought it might be helpful to name some of that. But Stacy, yeah, go ahead.
I'm just going to jump in for a second. Staff and providers. I really think some of these things are going to come from the field, like something that is not working the way we expect it to work. So that's it.
Great. Well, then maybe I offer Katie to start, and then others who are here and providers, please join in with your thoughts. It's a great question.
Thanks, Jess. Pardon my sound. I'm getting through illness. But one of the things that I also would love to share is we're trying to figure out as a staff how to better make this more visible. I think I have this conversation often with Kim of I'm like, Kim, yep, that's on the list and it will get to. And so how do you all have a better visibility to the list of what is coming in staff? And we recognize that it's a problem. Some of the things related to, there's been a ton of work. I'll start with the housing space and then kind of move to some of our other teams related to termination workflow and how that's going. We've heard a lot of feedback about inconsistencies across how folks are terminating, communication specifically with the ARLA team. So that's more I think it's both policy and also practical what's happening to make the work easier to do so that we can then serve more people. So I guess I should have started there as there's policy stuff and then there's practical stuff to make work more efficient and be able to serve folks. We're also working on language access and making sure that folks have accessible language, and then those resources are shared across all of our different providers. So if I translate for this one language and used SHS resources, how do we make that more broadly available? How are we working through rapid rehousing and some of those improvements? I guess, Stacey, I had a little bit of a pause when you were talking about kind of those scaffolding projects, because workforce to me is something that we absolutely need to improve in order for our rapid rehousing folks to be successful. And so to me, that is just as much integrated, and maybe scaffolding is the right word because we need it to be able to build the building. Regarding a lot of our we are in a massive coordinated entry revamp right now. I think we're maybe like 40% of the way through, not even. We've done a lot of surveying with folks, and are now in the future months, we will be coming back to you all on referral processes and the assessment and how we are prioritizing folks and what is the improvements that need to be made to best serve as we're coming to a limited resource space. And then on the front end, kind of the build out of access centers, how do we use access centers? How do we ensure folks are moving from access centers and outreach into shelter more effectively, and our shelter waitlist management? We have folks waiting a long time to get into shelter, and then that makes their shelter stays actually longer than it would be if they were very quickly connected to shelter. So pardon my pause, I didn't want to cough in your ear. And so really improving some of the time and length of stay in shelters so that we get folks through our system faster. And then I would say the thing that I am like the most passionate about that I would like to see in the next year is how are we talking about our system and the throughputs of our system? I think Jess presented some of this data that really talks about like kind of where is the need versus the capacity that we have in our system, but how do we have every single person in our system can talk about that very thoroughly and be able to say like, yes, for every 15 people coming in, only 10 people are exiting. Or what is that number that was happening? And that was our regional number last year. But what is that number in Washington County? How are we seeing throughput through our shelters, through our housing programs? And how do we get people through this system in a more efficient way, so that we are quickly getting people kind of. I love and hate HUD's definition of homelessness, that it's like short, it's one time, it's non-recurring, and it's you can quickly get back into housing. But how can we actually do that in Washington County using those three principles to say, if homelessness is happening to you, how do we get you back up on your feet? So that was maybe Katie's diatribe, but happy to have other folks jump in or dive more into any one of those. Oh, actually, one more. I just saw Adam, so now I have to share this. How do we better use our data sharing agreements is kind of the other big thing. So we just signed a data sharing agreement with HealthShare. And so how are we effectively using that to move the work forward and work in partnership? I think we also have interest in what does that look like with McKinney-Vento and jails and these other, and behavioral health and our other systems of care that we know there is quite a bit of duplication across, but we aren't working as effectively with those partners to serve folks in our system.
Are there other providers? Thank you, Katie, and sorry for putting you on the spot while you're not feeling well. I'm curious if providers have thoughts of parts of our system that could take a healthy looking at to make sure we're achieving the impacts that we're aiming for.
I think the answer is yes.
I'm just, do you think,
Danielle, go ahead.
sorry, I just am, I'm sitting with it a little bit because I think that it ties into your next slide too about the one-time funding. So I was trying to figure out where to place this comment, but I will just bring it up now. And I think because I'm an ED of a family shelter, it's going to be hard not to take it as a me problem, but I do think it is a systems issue, where we're looking at specifically the non-congregate shelter day rate. Families are receiving the same amount as a single person in a unit. So if it's that $96 per day, if it's someone in a pod or someone in a single occupancy, they're getting that same amount of money as shelters are getting for having 4 people in a unit. And so I think just really looking across the board at if that's an equitable approach. And we've talked with the county, we've talked about this already. So this isn't a new suggestion to county staff. And it sounds like it's something that can be assessed to have like a separate family day rate, or if there's other models that have multiple people per unit where it's being designated that way. But it does sound like something that wouldn't necessarily be able to be addressed this funding round. It sounds like maybe it's a next year into 27-28 issue. And so what was happening is we were getting the county tax levy, all the family shelters, and now that has gone away. And that tax levy sort of filled the gap in that discrepancy in day rates. And now it's gone. And so I would definitely propose using some of that money in this year to fill in that gap. And I do see it as a one-time gap because we are working on solutions in the future. And I do see that Elise is here as an attendant, and I know that she can't speak to that, but if we're able to like let her off mute if we're asking for provider input, she might have comment. I see Marcia too, who's not family provider, but if we're asking for provider input on things like this, it might be nice to give them the ability to speak right now, or I know there are other meetings where they can, but just a long-winded suggestion.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Jen, sorry, who am I?
Oh, yes, Danielle, thank you so much for saying that. And we have to draw a hard line with how we build space for Solutions Council members versus attendees, because you go through that thorough appointment process with the board. So it's not a matter of not wanting to hear from anyone
No, I
who's
know
here today
that.
listening in. And we really encourage you to provide feedback in those other spaces. I don't want it to come across as this, what's the word? Censored space, but we really prioritize participation from our Solutions Council members. So it's likely what Kim was jumping in to say, but I just wanted to acknowledge that.
It is exactly what I was going to say, but then Danielle, insert Kim. So don't you worry, you have advocates in this arena, specifically around this conversation about shelter day rates, and then as the niche of family shelter and what that should look like. So I think that there's advocacy happening for that. And then I do think there's some offline conversations happening that we want to make sure you're continuing to be a part of as you guys are going through this major transition with the safety levy changes. I think for me, Jess, the question, what guidance do you have for system refinement? I'm a little, for months, Jim asked for real numbers of people coming in, people going out, and those types of things. And in alignment with that, we have asked this question, maybe differently, around what's working and what's not working. From a data stance, I can tell you on the ground when I put my agency hat on as an executive director, what I think is working and not working. But what are we seeing throughout the entire system? And I don't know that we've really gotten that back. And so, is rapid rehousing working, or is that an area that we really should be looking at more closely and making some shifts with? I would advocate for that. And so part of it is I just don't know what truly is PSH working. And so sometimes I can't answer the question because I don't have all the information I need to actually make an informed decision. I only have my lived experience in our little world at PHC.
Well, thank you, Chair Marshall. I was waiting for you to say rapid rehousing because I know that that is a particularly challenging program, and we've experienced it's not just PHC, it's many partners have experienced challenge with that program, and I know that that is high on the list. And I appreciate you saying it's hard to answer this question until we have the information, and hold that thought because here comes Carly with our next agenda item. So to help us along here, we have just 10 minutes before we move on to Carly's agenda item. I want to move us into the next question as we conclude this kind of this 3-part series talking about how we do budget planning. one new thing we're going to start practicing with you all as our advisory body is our annual one-time investment decision making process. We haven't really had the stability in our system to kind of officially have this annual practice. Last year, for the first time, we brought forward to our board, and we brought it to your council, I think in the fall before the board, sort of an initial first step at planning one-time investments using their new framework for one-time investments. And now this coming year, we're gonna move into our annual cycle of doing this all the time. So at the end of each fiscal year, with whatever fund balance is remaining that is not required for existing capital projects that are under development or required reserve accounts, but the remaining balance that maybe was revenue in excess of expenditures from last year, we'll move into a discussion of how should those resources be prioritized in our system with one-time investments. As I showed you earlier, the image of our financial plan or our revenue to budget forecast for the next few years. We anticipate that we're going to have an end fund balance this year and next year. And so to Danielle's earlier comments, to other ideas you may all hold, it's time to start thinking about what are some priorities with those one-time investments that our staff can start planning for and bringing together information for you when we know what that official balance is, and we can start making an official proposal to our board to allocate those funds. So we won't know what that balance is probably until late August. But right now we want to move into planning mode of anticipating the availability of one-time funds. And as you saw on that slide, as much as maybe $18 million and what could be some of the priorities to how we would use those funds when that amount is determined. So turn that back over to you, Chair, to facilitate.
Any initial thoughts on that from council? Okay, thank you, Nadia, or Emily and Nadia with Adam. Could we go back to slide 13, the colored budget thing? And then, okay, not the pie chart, the one before, sorry. And Jess and Molly, we kind of talked about this yesterday, so I'm sorry for the repetition, and Vernon, you were there as well. I think part of me is, Jess, you just talked about the forecasting being a decrease in funding. And so how do we plan ahead for that? And I know that we have been conservative in our budgets for that reason, and reducing it, down by that 10%, which is important and strategic. I guess where I get hung up, okay, so sorry, you guys, total draft form with Kim's brain right now. What I need to understand is we are truly talking about budget changes to be made for July 1 of 27. This isn't go ahead.
Thank you for that question. I interrupted you. I thought I was off mute, but that's not quite correct, Kim.
Okay, so help me.
Yep. This would be effectively a mid-year adjustment. Thank you so much for that clarity. No, we are not talking about making adjustments to the FY 26-27 budget that gets approved in June to go into effect in July. What we're talking about is a process that will make a mid-year adjustment either in October or February with one-time funds. And we don't know what those monies are going to be, so we don't know how much, but that's when it would happen.
Okay, great. So one of the thoughts I had, and again, it's completely in draft form, is I would love to see us get some of the programs that we've prioritized in the pie chart. We don't have to go there, Emily, but the pie chart shows we've prioritized housing and we've prioritized safety on our streets, right? Making sure that the programs that fall within those are funded appropriately. Maybe not fully funded. I'm not necessarily asking for that, but funding it appropriately so that we can do the work we need to do successfully in those spaces. And so I'm going to, Stacy's still here. I need someone to kind of push and pull with me here. Because when I look at this budget, I'm probably going to say, hey, where is give? Because that's going to be one of the questions. If we increase anywhere, where is give on the other side? And when I look at the other budget, I lean into I think it was purple, the support services area, and wonder. I love the scaffolding image. That makes perfect sense to me. But I could also advocate that there's probably some scaffolding that we don't have that we need. And I want people in rapid rehousing to be successful and make sure that they have that opportunity for employment. But if they're having mental health crises and they're deep in their addiction, employment really isn't on the table right now. And that's some of the tensions that I play with. Now, part of that is who are we putting into rapid rehousing, which is a bigger question that we need to work through. So, and so when I think of one-time funding, I guess part of my point here is I'm not sure that one-time funding should be programmatic funding. That could get really contentious in some ways, you guys, because we're all going to have a need for more programmatic funding that we could go fight for. No, I need more programmatic funding. But really that one-time funding is going to be a very small amount that we need to be strategic with, like we were with the Metro allocation. We're intentional about eviction prevention because of the state cuts, and then some gap funding for awarded projects that had gaps for a multitude of reasons. So I kind of just wanted to say that out loud. I'm not making a ton of sense here because I haven't formed a full thought. But I would be hesitant that one-time funding lean into programmatic just because it could be beyond gray. So I would then look at our other budget, and like we can go back to slide 13 and say, where is some give in these arenas that we have set to make sure we're funding our priorities well. And then what could slip into what I would consider one-time funding in the long run. So that was a lot of nonsense, and I apologize. But I'll just take it to Katie offline. Katie, Stacy, yes, that's exactly what I'm hoping for. Please.
Yeah. So I wasn't actually trying to address one-time funding and support services, or what I will now call scaffold programs. So you're absolutely right. Like programmatic investments with this nice stable program that system that we're trying to create and invest in, it's separate from the conversation about one-time special fixes, things that have to change, whatever words you want to use for this one-time midstream funding, right? So it's going to all of a sudden bump up the likelihood that you have unspent funds in the same year you get it, unless you have the capacity to actually figure out what you're doing with that one-time funding. So that cycle is what we're coming into as a system, because now we're maturing and we are planning for a certain level of stability. The only reason why I mentioned the scaffold programs is because we don't talk about them a lot, and because it is what you're saying, like we've very much programmed or focused on the housing piece and safety off the streets, and that totally makes sense. But scaffolding is important in the system as well. And looking at the fact that the system infrastructure, just creating and keeping the beast alive, costs $4 million, and we only invest over $1 million in something that's opportunity creating, or really, I don't know what word you want to use for furniture, quality of life. you know, those are important things as well. And so just trying to keep things in some kind of steady state balance on the programmatic budget side. So you're absolutely right. I was not talking about one-time funding going into the programmatic budget side.
Great. Thank you. Yes, Abel, yes. Yeah. So Jess, we're not answering your question. Christina, yes.
Hey, I am driving, so if I am spotty, I apologize and I'll just email everybody later. So I had a thought, which is, and this, you're just asking for brainstorming, so I'll just throw it out there. Well, one thing, when I have excess of budget, right, in me as an ED and NAMI, I look at trying to figure out not starting something new, but putting the investment into the solid things that I have so that it makes my next year easier. That's very simplistic to say I put it into a reserve fund. I have no idea what the stipulations are for how we actually spend this money, or if we have to, or if there's a way to partner with the current programs or contractors that we have, asking them to put an investment into their physical something so that it makes the next year easier. Don't know, just throwing that out there. Second thought was possibly doing a little bit of a deeper dive into partnering with behavioral health, because y'all are talking about systems of care with the housing department and with case managers, et cetera. And I just keep thinking of the people that we're serving, and a huge miss. I mean, why people are getting evicted and why the system sometimes doesn't work for them is because sometimes in behavioral health, we don't have the funding or the connections to make the housing stable. And I'm not sure if that's making any sense, but happy to email more thoughts just because I'm driving.
Thank you, Christina. I love that framing. And thank you, everyone. These are been really thoughtful contributions. I'm going to help wrap us up here because, as Christina said, this is a brainstorm. This is really just to get your minds thinking about this because this conversation is coming. And I do want to offer something. I fully agree with what you're describing, Kim and Stacy, around the balance of, well, and Christina too, like how to use one-time funds strategically, because we don't want to increase capacity that then we have to decrease the next year. But one thing we did with one-time funds from Metro is we invested $4 million in 2 years of increased eviction prevention. And I want to give that all to you as part of your consideration, that there could be some areas where we think about multiple years of increase with one-time funding, but we would know that we wouldn't be able to sustain it past those multiple years. Okay. Wonderful discussion. Really appreciate this. This concludes budget season for us, but as I said, the work continues year round. So with that, I'm going to pass it back to Kim, I think, to introduce our next discussion.
Fantastic. Okay. Carly, you're here, right? Did I see you? Perfect. Wonderful. So Carly, we're so thankful that you're here with the Solutions Council. And we look forward to learning more about our performance management and evaluation tools, which, like Jess said, ties perfectly into how we're going to be able to budget.
Yeah, thank you. For those of you that I haven't met, I'm Carly Brandini, she, her pronouns. And I'm the Quality Improvement Coordinator here with the Homeless Services Division. So what I'm going to share with you today is kind of a high-level overview of our performance management and evaluation tools. And so just to kind of level set or frame, you can go to the next slide there, please. So performance and evaluation approaches. So what we aim to do and why we're doing this work is to establish clear standards for all of our service providers. So what is the expectation? What's the target? What are we measuring? Just, transparent and concise expectations. Some of our approaches and what we do around evaluation and assessment is to meet federal and local funding requirements. We also use these tools to identify and support underperforming programs or partners. We want to, of course, improve our program effectiveness, serve people better, and identify program efficiencies and cost savings to serve more people. So as you all are concluding the budget season, this leads kind of naturally into the system improvement season. And so that's what I'm hoping to talk about here, and kind of bring this to all of you as an overview of how we do that all year round. And then something to sort of be thinking about as I'm going through the slides is really like, as we look at the system, what questions should we be asking to determine if the system is working effectively? And I will restate that at the end, but feel free also to just raise your hand or pop off mute and ask questions as I go along too. Okay, first up is program scorecards. So this is one way that we are looking at metric data for each of our programs, and it's done on an agency level. So these go out monthly. They are provide where each partner is measuring on a metric for that particular program. So if, shelter utilization, the target is 90%, then it'll show that particular agency where they are on target or below target, above target, to meet that 90%. It also provides a visual breakdown of the agency's score compared against other agencies. So I could see myself on the 90% utilization, and I can see that there are 2 other shelter providers who are slightly above that target. And then there's, 6 other shelter providers that are a little bit below that target. I will pause. Adam, you have your hand up. Go for it.
Yeah, quick question. Is there any level of client acuity or complexity score that's going to also be associated? Like some programs will work with less folks, but more highly acute. Is there any of that happens in these scorecards?
There isn't really any of that happens in the scorecards. No. Yes, great question though.
I would also answer that with across our providers, like every agency is going to be getting compared across to the same, like you as a PSH provider is getting the same level of acuity in PSH. Family providers are getting compared against each other when we're looking at scorecards too. So we don't right now, based on our referral processes, we don't have everybody with mental health going to one agency kind of a thing. It's going across the board to folks.
Yeah, I understand like that. And I think there's some agencies work differently with higher acuity folks, and they some are like do it better than others. And that's just my impression of working with certain providers. And I'm just curious if at any point, like the level of complexity of the person that's being served is also going to be considered along with just the stats that are going to be in a scorecard like this.
Thank you for bringing, I think, great question, Adam. And Carly already knows this. We were on a call the other day. And so I don't know how we integrate that exactly, but I brought something kind of the same into a conversation around where's opportunity for narrative, exactly to your point. Where can we talk about the clients that we are so privileged to serve and how that is going to change our scorecard? Our scorecards are very much make everybody just a number, which feels a little off to me. And then I just, for clarity, because not everybody is doing scorecards and stuff. The visual breakdown of the agency scorecard against each other's agencies, I would say this is a little skewed as well. So we could have a partner, we could have 27 clients that are part of our scorecard or are part of that program within our agency and stuff. And another provider could get 100% because they only have 2. Well, with 2 clients, I could get 100% as well. And so sometimes it feels a little skewed skewed. I would love to, we try to look at it against ourselves month over month or year over year. How are we scoring and are we making improvements? Versus looking at the dots and going, wow, we are nowhere near that agency. What are they doing so well? But in reality, it's usually the answer is nuanced. Yes, Jess.
I just want to help us along with our time and agenda. We're stopping. Let's get that feedback, but let's get it at the end of Carly's presentation, if it's all right.
Okay, yeah, thanks everybody. I jotted a couple notes. And then finally on the program scorecards, there is also a row level detail spreadsheet that's provided to each of the partners for each of their programs. And that has all of the data points that are informing and translating into the score. And so there is an opportunity to make some corrections or improve program performance metrics. Not required, but the data is there to be able to kind of look at what is feeding those numbers. Our scorecards have rolled up into the annual performance evaluation. Yeah, so the slide number, 21. Perfect, thank you. So this year, the APE or the annual performance evaluation was moved to after the end of the fiscal year. So this did allow us to look at a full year of performance data for the first time in doing this activity. And so we were able to look at a full 12 months, and that really fed into the agency report and kind of the overall performance scoring for the organization. The historical shape that the annual performance evaluation has taken is looking at these 3 items listed here on the slide. So we look at financial metrics, which that includes invoicing and spend down. We look at individual programs. Those individual program scores from across multiple different organizations give us an overall program score as well. We can look at all of the data from 5 organizations into one report on HCMS as an example. And then we also accomplished the staff demographic and wage survey as part of the annual performance evaluation, which is a requirement that we have to do. And so those are the 3 kind of components that make the annual performance evaluation. And that has shifted to a late summer fall activity now so that we can capture that 12 months period. Next up, as one of our tools for evaluation and performance management is partner monitoring. So we just completed our first 2-year cycle of partner monitoring. And our current cadence is, or our cadence that we followed for the first year or the first cycle of doing it is every partner gets monitored once in that 2-year period. We look at 3 different areas in monitoring. We look at desk monitoring, policies and procedures, agency structures, different expectations that we have around termination policy, grievance policy, et cetera. We also are incorporating now some financial monitoring, and that is going to include looking at invoice processes, et cetera. And then finally, we look at participant file monitoring. So we do a random sample and have a set percentage that we look at of participants across the different programs that organization has, and look at requirements for files and HMIS and case notes / service transactions, et cetera. So that is what our partner monitoring has looked like currently. We are planning right now for our next 2-year period. We ended a little bit early before the end of the fiscal year. And so we're starting sort of the prep and planning for our next 2-year cycle. Next up, we have performance improvement plans. So PIPs for short are for providers that are struggling to meet baseline programmatic requirements. Our organizations who are on a PIP receive targeted improvement objectives. So really working together to identify the areas that need to be improved, what we're looking for, or what is the target for that improvement, and then how we will track that. We also meet with partners who are on a PIP regularly, kind of review the progress, do any problem solving, and offer support. Support could be some additional training. It could be providing some feedback to the organizations on how they're training or onboarding to get folks ready to do the work. It could be, reviewing policies and procedures, supporting supervisors, et cetera. It's kind of whatever that organization needs in order to make some performance improvement. And then we are adding to the PIP structure more frequent monitoring. So I talked about on the previous slide that partner monitoring is once every 2-year cycle. And in the future, we will have more frequent monitoring for our organizations who are on performance improvement plans in order to be able to have a little bit more, just oversight and more opportunities to check in and see how things are going. And then our new program that we're finalizing and rolling out is an internal system evaluation. So this will be a data-driven internal assessment of individual programs. So looking at what is the program overall effective in its design and structure? Are the performance targets that we have identified through the scope of work and the manual, are those solving for the intended outcomes that we want to see for this program? And does the program design successfully serve participants? So really kind of looking at, enhanced rapid rehousing as an example, as a whole. What are the goals and outcomes for enhanced rapid rehousing? Is this just the structure and the design of this program getting us towards those performance targets and solving for those? And I think also like a check of if the metrics or targets aren't solving for intended outcomes, are they a reporting requirement or a requirement elsewhere? So just because they don't solve for it, if there's one or two that don't, doesn't mean that they aren't required for some other reason. So making sure that we don't take out something that is actually needed for another purpose. But that internal system evaluation will be kicking off a little bit later on in the spring, and so we're excited to kind of venture into that. So that's a very brief kind of high-level overview of our different tools that we use, both externally and soon to come internally, around evaluation and assessment work. And so we can go to the next slide, which are the questions for you all. So I'll just start with the first one. With that snapshot, is there a sense or thoughts on is the evaluation like balanced and effective? Are we successfully like looking at our system and looking at our partners and doing that work?
Welcome to just unmute if you have some thoughts, please. Or raise your hand, Kim Han.
Oh, I didn't follow my directions from you. Sorry. When I looked at these slides before the meeting when they were sent out, I think it's good to have an evaluation process with anything because you want to make sure that you're on the right road and on the right path. The only thing that caught my eye was the previous slide about the data-driven assessment. And I just want to use a lot of caution with using the term data-driven. I would say data-informed, because you want to make sure, like our providers might be up against barriers that are preventing. I'm going to keep going with the scaffolding because I love that, a piece of scaffolding that they aren't able to have access to, or it's not funded or something like that. So I would just be really careful about not jumping immediately to the data having to drive, determining whether or not something is working or not, because it needs to be something that gets flipped around the other direction to our providers getting what they need to be able to do their job. I don't know. It's just, it might be semantics, but it's just something that we do a lot of this kind of stuff at TVFNR, because we always want to make sure that we're moving in the right direction and that we have the tools in our toolbox that we need. And so we have eliminated the terminology data-driven to data-informed. So that's just my 2 cents. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate that. Adam?
I have more of a question than a comment, and I'm just curious, what's in it for the providers who score well? Do they get, is there a financial incentive? Is there like a gold star? What are the advantages for those that are like high achieving, high performing programs?
That is also a great question. I think, I mean, I don't know if Jess or Katie would answer this differently. I guess we acknowledge, I get in my process, the process that I oversee, I think we demonstrate sort of just like the recognition of the work that's being done through the reports and the relationship that we have, that the monitoring staff has with our partners, to really just give them kudos and appreciation for how well they're doing, and kind of like highlight that in the reports that we provide. I would say, I think using, we're always looking for stories and for like folks who are doing well to share with us how they're doing well. And I think that's something that we're really building more of as we look to our future evaluation and work, is to really ask folks, like, what do you feel like is working well for you? And what do you want to highlight of the work that you're doing within the system, and finding ways to sort of elevate that and share that out with others, for recognition of those partners who really are hitting it out of the park or have creative solutions to the work that they are willing to share and work, with others on. So.
Another great question. Thank you. And we've asked for this. Like, when we see someone doing really well on it, there's this chart that has dots, is how I look at it. And when we see someone doing well, we're going, what are they doing differently? Can they share their success with us, and how they're making it so that they're always above the line or the goal? We would love that information, not necessarily for kudos, but just because we want to do better. We want to make sure we're hitting those goals, and striving for. Yeah, you get my point. Jess, did you unmute? Did I see that? Sorry.
I did, though I see we're running out of time, so I will yield my time back to the questions of the group.
Carly, I've already given my example of it not being balanced and effective when we have programs that the number of case managers or the number of clients being served are drastically different, and yet we're all being evaluated the same. About IC.
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure if this would be like the right venue for it, I guess. But I was looking at the third question in particular, and just thinking about my experience as somebody that's helped families do those like community connect assessments. I know, like, once everything was more or less consolidated into like everything gets funneled through there, there was, well, to use the word, there was like a bottleneck, at least at the beginning. And so I would hear from community partners like, Good Neighbor Center, Family Promise, that there was some discrepancies in whether, like, they had some shelter space available, but it wasn't translating to people who are doing the assessment getting that housing immediately or getting that shelter immediately. And so I'd be curious to know what that data looks like now. Like, is there still bottlenecking issues? Has it improved? Like, what does that look like right now?
Okay, yeah, thank you. So for number 3 there, a particular program to look at or be evaluated is your bottlenecking issues. And you said with Community Connect / coordinated entry. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, great. Is there anyone, I guess for number 2, since we haven't really touched on that one, are there folks who have experience with evaluation work and that could help improve our approach or improve our impact?
Sorry, I feel like I'm like taking up too much airtime today, but I think one of the approaches that we're taking a lot when we're looking at the healthcare outcomes is who actually gets better and who actually is having the intended result of the thing that they're doing. And so what I didn't necessarily see on here was is the program serving what it's supposed to be doing? Are people staying in permanent supported housing at a high rate? Are folks who are in shelter getting connected to their next level of care? And so those would be the things from an evaluation standpoint that I would want to see from a program is are they serving their intended purpose, and at what level are they serving that intended purpose? And I would want to be really specific about what the outcomes and goals of each level of housing would be, and then love to see how programs were doing on those performance metrics.
I think we've circled around part of my experience. I was going to actually say, well, what Adam said before, the idea that providers are seeing a benefit to all this evaluation and that they're getting data and that they're understanding it and then turning around and being able to use it for their own processes and their own internal improvement. I mean, you used internal as internal across the providers, and that makes a lot of sense. But then internal to their organizations, these should be valuable data, convenings. Are they reports? Are they, recordings? Like how do you engage with them so that it's not just like, here's all the data we have to do this month, and before we know it, it's the next month and we're throwing it in again. Can we make it meaningful to like, oh, we're waiting for those numbers and look at what they did? And Kim talked about it some, like, oh, we try to compare against ourselves, and so that makes the collection more valuable and meaningful to them, and so then that will make it more effective. So I think the balance between using it regionally was my expectation, right? So I haven't heard the magic words, which is what I wanted to hear, was like, yes, all this evaluation will also be going across counties, and while you might not get a gold star or whatever, you're not going to get, you're not going to swamp us, or you're not going to have to go report to other partners, or anything like that. Just the kind of, we're in it learning and making progress together, and we all understand that this reporting is meaningful and valuable is where we want to go, and that's the best evaluation work.
Thanks, Stacey. Are there other programs or parts of the system that folks would like to prioritize to be evaluated and bring back to this group?
One minute, enough time for one final comment. Round us out, someone.
I think our ask today with our budget conversation was we want to know more about how programs are working. So I don't know that it's a particular program. I think it's across the board, the programs, and seeing those evaluations that can be brought back to this group and then continue this conversation, the budget conversation, and ongoing systems change. Okay, you guys, we are done. Carly, thank you for joining us today. We appreciate you being here and diving into this with us, and we will continue that conversation. It is right on time. Jess, thank you for keeping us on time. And so thank you everybody for being here. We will adjourn this meeting and we will see you soon.
Thank you all.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye.